Okay, the prep time has expired, and we would like to open this grand final by presenting Taya as a Prime Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. So we should talk about in this debate who should decide the policy, intelligence or the citizen. We should talk about this point. So we strongly propose this motion. Firstly, I'd like to define today's motion. What is populism? In our cases, what is anti-populist country is today's Greece or Italy. So politicians follow only consultant or the financial expert like the Marimonti in Italy or something. So government and what is populism? They use money, so they lose finance. They are financial policy without means to get source of budget. So this is our definition. So this is populism because they, in order to get their popularity, they use money without means. Yes.
So I understood what is anti-populism. So would you clarify what do you mean by populism in your case?
So in populism, they want as a politician really follow the citizens' voice. This is populism.
Clarification.
Sorry. So I'll be talking about the first point. First point is the principle level. Who should decide the policy? And second is the practical level. The chaos can be stopped. Let me talk about one by one. So in democratic country, government should be decided by majority of citizens. So democracy is system to respect majority. For example, election system or something. So in this system, we can achieve the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So most people can become happy.
Okay,
So,
clarification.
sorry. In Italy, in this case, they are anti-populist, so they ignore this principle. So politicians believe, so in Italy, the politicians believe citizen is irrational or citizen is stupid. So they follow only specialists. So they didn't
Clarification, please.
to citizen because yes.
If my reading comprehension is not challenged, the motion raised this house would support populism. What I hear from you until the second means that is like you are talking about this house would support democracy. How would you actually explain that?
No. Not in. The populism is ultimate stage of democracy. So the democracy's merit is the populism merit. So it is no problem. So in such case, they cannot think about citizens severely. So because this policy is not for citizens, but for such specialists. So even though citizens think about their nation severely, such idea cannot be accepted in a populism case. So this is against the principle of democracy. So, sorry. So, opposition image. So, in democracy, all citizen voice can be reflected. However, that's not true because actually, such in Italy or in Greece, citizen voice are neglected. So it is even though this is the democracy country, however, this country is not populism. So populism. So such situation is against the principle of democracy. So this is the same with the imperial form of government. So deny populism means the go back in imperial age. So we strongly support the populism. So secondly, I'm talking about the chaos-based populism. So in not populist case, so in Greece, the politicians don't follow citizen voice actually. So politician only listen to expert voice. So politician raise tax or decrease social welfare against the citizens' voice, the citizens' opinion. Why it is this is democracy. So so actually, however, in the southwest, the Greece is democratic country, and politician can be elected by the elected in democracy. So, however, in such country, politicians don't follow such citizens' voice. So citizens demonstrate to protest this policy because they have no way but demonstrate to protect such policy. So they broke car or they destroy the they broke a car or shop or they rob many shops. So they are confused. So economy cannot be improved. However, in populism case, government follows citizens' voice even if it is loose or even if politicians believe this is bad because in populism this is bad. So citizens don't get complaint about such policy even though this is the bad thing politicians think. However, so citizens don't get complaint. So such confusion, such such demonstration don't occur. Moreover, so if real crisis occur to go bankrupt, the citizens demand politicians to stop lose financial policy because they don't want to go bankrupt such country because they have big harm when such country, such government go bankrupt. So we believe that populism is good for citizens and follow the principle of democracy. So we strongly propose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your remark. I'd like to welcome the Leader of the Opposition to open up your case within 7 minutes. You're here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, honorable adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen in this House. Mr. Speaker, this debate is not about democracy versus anti-democracy. We don't deny the democracy itself. This debate should be the anti-populistic democracy or populistic democracy. And what the government side have to prove is why populistic democracy is better than anti-populistic democracy. And we are first of all, they mischaracterize the populism itself. Now moving on to. Now we have two things to talk about. First of all, why populistic democracy is against the idea of indirect democracy, which is the base of our society. And second of all, why populistic democracy is equal to the majority-centric politics, and how the populistic democracy is neglecting the benefit of the minority, and how it's principally wrong. And now, before that, several rebuttals to the previous speaker. First of all, they contextualize this debate in Greece or Italy or etc. And politics is not working for the benefit of the citizens in Greece and Italy, and citizens are suffering in so much, and they do demonstration, and we need to solve that. But Mr. Speaker, as I already told you in my introduction, we are not denying the democracy. This debate is anti-populistic democracy or populistic democracy. We are very happy to solve these people who are suffering in Greece or Italy. So their problem is totally irrelevant. Now moving on to our argument. First of all, why populistic democracy is against the idea of indirect democracy, and it's wrong. Mr. Speaker, we are based on indirect democracy, which means that every citizens have the right to vote and choose the politicians. And politicians we believe politicians is the one who are entrusted the right to manage the policies and decide the policies which are better for the benefit of the citizens. They are not like a spokesman which listen to every single word of citizens say and realize all kinds of benefit which majority says. We believe politicians have the right to decide the policy and not by listening to every single word what citizens say. Why is that? Because politicians are a unique actor who can manage the politics better for the citizens. Why is that? From three reasons. First of all, because time is so limited for ordinary citizens to research about the current policies and what kind of policies is better for our nation's future. But on the other hand, politicians is the professional who spends most of their time on researching what kind of policies is better for our own nation. And second of all, resources is totally different. Politicians have a much number of secretaries, and they can collect information more effectively than ordinary citizens. They can know much about what is the current problem, what is the root cause of the current politics, and what kind of policies is needed to solve these kind of problems. And third of all, politicians have specific knowledge which ordinary citizens cannot get. Just going to compulsory education, going to the higher education, it's difficult to get the specific political knowledge and what kind of policies is sustainable and better for the country's future. So politicians, from these three aspects, politicians should have the right to decide what kind of policies is better for the citizens. But after but in their paradigm, if we support populistic democracy, what happens is every politician comes to have the incentive to realize which are benefiting only the majority. What happens? First example is, as we see in Japan, the politicians will deny the policy of increasing tax because increasing tax is against the benefit of the majorities. And that is why even if we need to increase a tax to achieve sustainable economy, under their paradigm, the politicians will neglect that necessity, and also we believe under their paradigm they lack the sustainability. Why is that? Because like a child allowance or there are many policies which are not sustainable. But if we just prioritize the majority's idea who do not have enough specific knowledge what kind of policies are sustainable or not, the politicians will to get a vote. Politicians will only listen to what the majority says and give what the majority wants. It's totally neglect the sustainability of the policies, and it's totally harmful for our nation. That is why on the first level we believe politicians shouldn't listen to every single word what the citizens said. Yes, opening.
So what you say is that in the populism, the politicians hear the voice of the majority. So therefore, in Italy, now like the prime minister is like the ex-chief of the European Central Bank, who are not the politicians, and he do not hear the voice of the citizens. We say that your analysis of populism is true, and therefore we believe in the status quo in Italy or Greece. Economists or those kind of analysts dominate the government.
No. We believe that what they're saying is the populistic democracy which have only incentive to realize the benefit of the majorities. Now, moving on to the second argument, why this, under their paradigm, politics become majority-centric and how it's problematic. Under our paradigm, anti-populistic and under the anti-populistic democracy, the politicians are balancing the benefit of the majorities and minorities. Politics, in many cases, is a zero-sum game. Why is that? Because by realizing the majority's benefit, sometimes is against the benefit of the minorities. So before making the manifesto and claiming what kind of policies is necessary, they are balancing the benefit of majority and minority and try their best to show the manifesto which can balancing the benefit of majority and minority. But under their paradigm, the politics become majority-centric. All politicians just listen to, have the incentive to realize majorities' benefit, and minorities like Hispanic or Black people cannot get enough welfare payment or enough scholarship and cannot go to higher education, and they will suffer under their paradigm. But it's principally wrong because they cannot choose to what kind of race, what kind of family they are born in, or they are also taxpayers. They are paying also paying the taxes as the majorities. So we believe politicians have the obligation to listen to not just the majority's benefit, but also the minority's benefit, and their paradigm is totally against this idea of democracy. So we're very proud to propose.
Thank you for the opposition. I'd like to call upon Deputy Prime Minister to continue your case within 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, as opening opposition has said, like in the populism, the politicians only hear the voice of the citizens, and he believes that the citizens refuse to raise the taxes because they are like indulgent, or they cannot have long-term views for the budget of the state. Mr. Speaker, therefore, like the intelligent person or the politicians in Italy believe that the citizens are stupid when it comes to the financial crisis. Now, Italy believes like Mario Monti, who are the analyst in the Bruegel, or who are the consultant in the Goldman Sachs, and he's not the politician, but the politicians in Italy do not, or IMF do not care, because they believe that when it comes to the populism, if we hear the voice of the citizens, citizens deny the raising the taxes, citizens deny the austerity policies. Therefore, we believe that that's like oppression against the people. Even in the financial crisis, even in the urgent need, we believe that the citizens can make the rational decision. If the politicians think, arbitrarily believe the citizens cannot make the decision, and the deprivation of the right to control the government is not justifiable when even in the case of the economic crisis. Firstly, I'd like to confirm what the opening opposition has said. Like opening opposition has said, when in the case of the populism, because the politicians hear the voice of the majority, minority would be oppressed. This is the same with the democratic systems, right? Because politicians hear the voice of the majority. Therefore, if the politicians always make a balance for the majority and the minority, or if the discrimination is so severe for the minority, court will save them because of those law is unjustifiable. We do not see any problem from the argument of the opening opposition, because they do not show any difference from the democracy and the populism in the first place. Moving to my first issue. My partner has mentioned, no thank you. My partner has mentioned that how even in the case of crisis for the state, citizens should have the right to control the government. The state should not be controlled only by the intelligent person like the economist or analyst in the Greece or Italy, for example. No thank you. Mr. Speaker, in the case of Italy, for example, even Mario Monti, who was ex-analyst in the Goldman Sachs, do not have the popularity among the citizens, I mean the supporting rate of the Mario Monti is under the 30%, and he do not belong to any political parties. It means that he was not supported by anybody. He still has the right to control the government. He passed through the austerity policy without getting any allowance from the citizens, Mr. Speaker. No, thank you. Therefore, we believe that the citizens are frustrated because especially for the crisis, citizens have to tolerate the harm from the policy of the government. They have the right to control the government. They have the right to choose what kind of the gravity of the austerity policy should be passed through in the Congress, Mr. Speaker. Because if they cannot do that, they have to suffer from the sudden decrease of the bonus for the public officials in Greece, for example, without giving any information before they decrease the salary of the public official by 50%. They have to tolerate that kind of the harm, Mr. Speaker. We believe this is necessary, especially for the crisis. Secondly, no, thank you. Secondly, my partner has mentioned if we do not get any recognition of the citizens to decrease the taxes, citizens have nothing but to going into the going outside and they do the demonstration and riot. If 70, 100 people go into the square of Italy or Greece, they block public facilities in its nation. We believe that we have a strong local social security in our nation, and the opening opposition do not care about this point. Yes.
Okay, do you honestly believe that even in the context of Euro crisis, we should not have any austerity measures so that we can follow the voice of the protesters?
What I continuously say is that those kind of one-sided view by the politicians or intelligent person who believe that citizens cannot make the rational decision because they are indulgent and because they believe that they misunderstand that the citizens always jump to the populistic ideas for those kind of people. Citizens still have the right to choose their national decision. Moving to my second issue. On my second issue, I'd like to mention about what kind of the situation, what kind of the policies citizens. The government have to have to encourage the citizens to actively to choose the austerity policy on their own decisions. Mr. Speaker, in the status quo, because one-sidedly, the economist or consultant of the Prime Minister arbitrarily passed through the laws based on the order of the IMF, those kind of sudden decrease of the bonuses for the people, or sudden increase of the taxes for the citizens are passed through, and therefore, and because those economists or those analysts are not professional politicians, they are not so talkative to persuade the citizens, and therefore we believe the citizens always have the antipathy towards them because they think that they are the victims. Their voice is not reflected by the policy making process. No, thank you. We believe that, therefore, in the status quo, teachers, even though the teacher unions, even in the case of teachers in Italy, get excessive income, even though they work 5 days a week, but they do not care. They do not think deeply about their cost for their bonuses, for their salaries, because they just believe that suddenly the government decreases our income and so forth. After taking proposal, the government say, okay, let you to choose whether you take the austerity policy or not. They have to realize that they have to deeply care on themselves that why in the urgent situation of its government, because they have to take the responsibility for the future of our nations. Therefore, those citizens take actively the austerity policy because they jump to the indulgent policy for the state. They cannot sustain the state and they can sustain the lives in a society. Therefore, even after they get rid of the economic crisis, they do not jump to the populistic policies in the end. Therefore, we believe that for all those reasons, it is necessary for the citizens not to have the right and to harm themselves on their own decision with the perspective for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for your remark. I'd like to call upon Deputy Leader of the Opposition to continue your case within 7 minutes. You're here.
I guess we were expecting too much from the opening government when we asked them, when we want them to actually clarify what they mean by the populism and what they mean by normal democracy. And they failed to clarify that. We are doing them a good service by trying to clarify it for their sake, and they should thank us for that, right? Now let me refute the opening government. The only thing that Prime Minister managed to clarify is that some countries are anti-populist, and that in those countries, even in those countries, they are actually taking votes for the democracy, right? Okay, so starting with my first refutation to the Prime Minister. He talked about, like, we need to respect people's opinion, citizens' opinion, we need to respect majority, right? Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, how do actually democracy work even in the status quo, even without embracing populism? Simple. You actually accumulate a lot of policies, and you make the citizens choose from those accumulated policies, because that is representation. You make a lot, it is actually based on the votes of the people, of the majority. So we do not see why we need to embrace populism for this, where people take individual hand in deciding which policy to take, which or not, rather than deciding eclectic thing. We have told you from the opening opposition, the unique reason why we need the normal democracy or anti-populism democracy is because that when we follow the majority's wish, it will always going to fall, the balance is going to tip, always going to tip to the majority side. Let's take the example of, say, reduction taxes. We agree that the majority will most likely say that, let's reduce taxes, after we don't need that much taxes, right? So the thing is, okay, maybe they want, if you follow populism, they'll decrease the tax. At the same time, people will always want more welfare, right? Let's increase the welfare. Let's just, everybody wants to increase the welfare. The popular opinion says so. They want to increase the welfare. So we will just increase the welfare. Question, how do you resolve the contradiction when you decrease the number of tests and yet you try to give people the more money? We do not see any resolution from them. Finally, when they say that states should not be controlled only by intelligent people, let me ask them something. So they believe that the majority, no matter how unintelligent they are, should be the ones who make the decisions, should be the ones who agree, to pass a decision in a certain country. If that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, why do we even need democracy in the first place? Why do we even need the government? We can always have a referendum, everybody gathering together, saying like, 100% of people wants this, 98% of the person wants this. But no, we do not have that, because we believe that democracy is important. And finally, talking about Italy, and people opposing, austerity measures and the government, arbitrarily taking it, we believe that, Mr. Speaker, this contradicts the claim of the government saying that, people can take the right decision in the normal people can take the right decision. Because they land themselves in a crisis. They managed to land themselves during the crisis. They managed to spend everything and get into a crisis that cannot resolve. And then they still try to claim that they can resolve everything. If the people, majority, can always resolve everything, they have already done that, dumbass. Right? But the thing is that because they can't do that, which is why the government tries to save them using austerity measures. So do they believe, as the opening government, that you do not need any austerity measures to solve the economic crisis when visibly the people have already failed in evading the crisis and resolving the crisis by themselves? No, we do not see any reason from the opening government. I'll give the opening government a chance, yes.
But if citizens are forced to undertake the austerity measure, even though they can get rid of economic crisis, and then they also back to the indulgent measures.
The thing is, Mr. Speaker, we do not encourage the forcing of the citizens. Like what we're talking about here, we're going to explain to you the difference between the populism and normal democracy as the first extension, right? We're never forcing them in, anti-populism democracy, because after all, we are still making a collective measure, a holistic policies that we give to the citizens, and the citizens actually can choose via election which one they want to choose, which one they want to represent them as the government, as their own government, right? So the thing is, yes, if you're talking about those government who are overly forcing the people into the point of dictatorship, in the democracy, people can always overthrow such kind of government. We do not think that the government who is just, that arbitrary. But the thing is, although the government does not necessarily need to be arbitrary every time in anti-populism, during populism, which they fail to clarify, by the way, during populism, if you support and embrace populism, it means that the government has to, without fail, comply to every single needs of the majority of the popular opinion. And we believe that this is bad due to reasons we've stated before, how it is contradictive and how it is, how it's contradictive in the first place. Now I'm going to explain to you why this is going to harm, the minority in the first place. So they talk about maintaining the role for the majority. But Mr. Speaker, let's think of it. When we talk about government, we don't say that we are representing the Austro nations. We are representing the Muslims, for example. No. If we say, in my country, we are representing Indonesia as a government. Hello again. As a They're saying we are representing a country, and therefore it should encompass every single person. It should consider every single person inside the country, not only the majority. Now, the main flaw with populism, ladies and gentlemen, is that because we always consider the opinions of the majority, some policies are never, will never get through. Some policies will never get, will never be realized, and therefore there will be no change. The society will be rigid. Take, for example, if you talk about, like, say, gay marriage, for example, right? Obviously, the majority in a certain place will probably say that no, we don't want LGBT marriage. Talk about giving like jobs to the black people, for example. No, the majority probably will say that no, the black people don't deserve the job, right? And that is happening, even in the status quo. Now the problem is that we believe that the government is not a perfect thing. The government should keep evolving, and so should the country along with the government. And now we believe that by supporting populism, by embracing populism, we acknowledge that the majority right now is omniscient. We acknowledge that the majority now is always correct, and therefore the country does not need to take any measures other than to comply with the majority's wish. Now the burden of proof of the government best is to prove how the majority is always right, how the majority's thoughts, individual thoughts, are going to help the whole country as a whole. We do not see any of this proof given by the opening government. So we like to oppose this motion, right? And finally, we are talking about extending this populism towards international relations. As we know, countries cannot stand alone. Governments cannot stand alone, but rather they need to coexist with other countries in international relations, right? The problem with populism is it also inhibits multilateral communication of different ideologies, for example. Because, for example, take for example, if you're the United States, for example, you're talking about the Arabic nations, which, by the way, the majority hates because of the connotation connected with Islam, for example, right? So what is the popular opinion? Invade those Arabic countries, for example, or take all the oil from them? Are we actually complying to those popular opinions or the popular demand that we should actually take away those Arabic people just because the popular opinion is that those countries are bad, those countries are enemies? No, we believe that democracy exists because we need the smart people, intelligent people, which the people have agreed to rule them, to actually provide them a way in case that the majority fails to see the big picture, in case that the majority fails to see what is best for the country, which is why we need a democracy in the very first place, even if it is anti-populism. So ultimately, the burden of proof falls on the government is that why is the people always right? When even in anti-populism, those advisors and those people in the parliament, which by the way is in status quo, right, in the parliament, right, it is only a select group of people, never the majority, but those people are given the power to make certain policies and to decide what is good and what is bad, what is correct and what is not for the country. We believe that is, even though it is anti-populist, it does not represent the majority's opinion at the time. We believe that is the best case because the people have already voted for them in the past and they believe that this is the best solution for them. They should be responsible for the policies. So therefore, we believe that we should oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, for your remark. Now, I'd like to call upon member of the government to open up your case within 7 minutes here.
Thank you. We in the closing government came here to tell what is the best relationship between the people and the states. Because ultimately, we cannot know what is happening in the future. We think in that case, it's better when the people can be accountable to their future. We believe that populism is the best form of polity when every single citizen can be accountable to their future, even if states has failed. This is the idea which constitutes our extension. Firstly, I'm going to talk about why populism is the best way for the people to be accountable to their future. And secondly, I'm going to explain why anti-populistic government is harmful in the sense it focuses on the benefit of the states, not the benefit of the people. I'll explain it one by one. Before that, several points of rebuttal. Well, the entire logic that came from the opposition is that it is better that politicians should decide, not the citizen, because the politics is very difficult to the citizen, for people to understand. We think in the first place, in the liberal democracy society, that the vast majority of people in liberal democracy can understand what is written in the manifesto, right? So we believe there is no problem in the sense that they can understand what politicians are going to do. But more than that, if it is so difficult for uneducated people to actually understand, we believe that politicians have an obligation to tell them, well, in the forms of well-organized manifesto, right? It is important for a politician to make it easier in order for those every people can understand it. It is discriminatory for them to say the elite is the best because nobody can understand the future. Secondly, they say that authority measure is good, like fiscal authority in the European community. Well, I actually agree that those fiscal authority or those elite create the plan. But before they conduct it, we think the citizen should decide and citizens should watch it. Because if those authority measures or those elites are so perfect, then no single economic crisis has occurred in the history, right? So in that sense, because nobody can understand what is best for the citizen, because nobody can understand what is happening to the future, we think that those citizens should understand or should actually think it might be necessary when the states actually have failed. So first extension, why populism is the best way for the people to be accountable to the future. We think that when the states follow the populism, actually people's will, the majority's will, it is good. Why? Firstly, if we analyze how people lead the EU wish to the politician, we think several conditions are here. Firstly, that they actually look the manifesto or policy that he's going to do. What they are actually going to do for the politician who are going to vote is exactly the same as what you want state to do. For example, no thank you, in the manifesto and choose the way that you like. But secondly, more importantly, we think it's good because when they vote, when they follow populism, that those citizens, each citizen, are actually trust the politician itself. Because we think it's important. It actually might be that because of the characteristic of each politician, or it might be some talented politician or some of the ex-politician, right? However, we think it's important that those people, it's important that when every citizen actually can trust and every citizen can be accountable what he or she that they chose is going to do. We think it's important. Why? No thank you. No thank you. Why? Because ultimately, nobody can know what is the best policy, or nobody can know what is, what is the best feature, or what policy is the best for us. So therefore, if they got failed, that those populism actually in the paradigm of populism, citizens are less depressed because they think that it is necessary when they fail because I trust him and he will do that policy, so it is necessary. However, we think what those anti-populistic democracy does is that if they fail, they can feel that their bloody talks is actually wasted by those people that I didn't trust. We think it's bad. We think this is bad. Why? Because every policy will affect to their own. And every policy will affect in a negative way or positive way. Nobody can understand. So therefore, we think this trust is especially important for the people to be accountable to their future. So second extension, why anti-populism is harmful in the sense it focuses on the state's benefit. Yes, sir.
Okay, even on the our proposal, there is accountability in the sense that politicians are elected by the citizens, right? So why does it have to go further?
So you're saying that Eritrean government, people in the Eritrean government are actually elected by people. I don't understand. So second issue, why anti-populism is harmful? Like Italy government, it's harmful in the sense that it focuses on the state's benefit. Firstly, we think that two things. The benefit of the state and the benefit of the people doesn't necessarily match all the time. Because, for example, Italy is a good example. We actually, as a state, Italy focus on reconstruction of the economy as into European community, right? So the budget of the people or budget of the state is to be allocated to stimulate economy or pay their debt back. On the other hand, we think what this policy does is actually harming the people because this policy might make those citizens to be work further and further, or those salary itself cannot be sustained compared to the status quo. We think it means that the people are more likely to be abused in the working environment. We think it's bad. We think it is firstly, as I said, it is against the people's will. People are more depressed when those completely another person can do it. But secondly, we think that as a politician, it's incredibly likely to focus on the state, not the people. So, for example, in the European community is a good example. The states are not focused on its people like Greece. They actually focus on the entire economy of European nation itself, because they actually forced to change your policy, which is against the Greek people. We think it's anyway. Therefore, we think anti-populistic democracy is so harmful. So anyway, Koki-san, citizens should decide. Thank you.
Thank you, member of the government. Now I would like to call member of the opposition to open up your case within 7 minutes. You're here.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we think the prop bench misunderstood what the crux of this debate is about. Misunderstood what our model is and what their model is, what the distinction between our both model is. I think the model we support, as it clarified by the opening option, we support indirect representation as we do in the status quo. For instance, if we hold elections which has an interval of the 3 years or the 4 years, 5 years, I think those are the model we support under options cases. So supposedly, the populism democracy which the opposition is supporting is asking citizens constantly about every issues in there, right? So we think that is the distinction they need to recognize in today's debate. Because the members' government extension was, well, the people will be exploited because benefit of the state and the people don't match. We think that doesn't happen in an opposite model when you have those 3 or 5 years interval to elect the persons in the first place. In this scenario. So opening option basically talks about there's possibility decision will fail. We're going to tell you why people's decision is highly likely to fail when there's no interval between the elections in this scenario, and why our policy, which is indirect representation, which has 3-5 years interval, will solve those balances. No, thank you. That is the extension we're going to do on this side of the house. Before that, let me engage with another issue from the member of government. Member of government said, well, nobody knows the future, so like citizens should decide. What we're going to suggest on the options cases, in an options case, citizens can have best decisions and better decisions, can have better calculuses of the policies in this situation, but their policy will undermine that. That's going to be our extensions. And they say people will be highly likely to feel distrusted. Mr. Speaker, we think these people won't feel distrusted when they can see the outcome after a 3-5 years interval in this situation. Let's get straight to our extensions. Firstly, I'm going to tell you why our policy is principally legitimate in this situation, which clashes the opening arms analysis. Second, I'm going to tell you why diminishing the 3 years those interval will lead to the situation where people is more likely to make short-term decisions and who did not benefit of the citizens in the first place. Thirdly, I'm going to tell you why our policy has faced much better situation. The first about legitimacy. We heard from the opening government, well, no thank you. There is a scenario that there's no politician who is deciding the policy, just as we can see in the Greece, or who appointed like the analysts on the top of the state in this situation. Mr. Speaker, the principle we support on this side of the House, there's a chain which transcends domestic legitimacies from one person to another person in this situation. So even if this prime minister chooses another person to be top of the government, those prime minister has a choice to fire that person. That means we can transcend those domestic legitimacies from one person to another person, and there's a chain within that, right? No, thank you. That's what we think. Though, as long as there's a chain which will transcend those people's will and people's voices in there, we think our policy is morally correct. So moving on to the second extension debate about why their policy will likely create short-term decisions in these cases. We think there are a couple of reasons here. Firstly, within these people, it's more likely to make short-term decisions in general because its benefit is obvious in these situations. So if you talk about the Greece situation, which the opening government wants to talk, it's about we need to dismantle certain industry, thank you, to fix the economy in this situation. We have to close certain factory to cover up this economy. But you can't see the recovery of the economies in this situation. But what you can feel is dismantling those industry and the firing of the job in this situation. You are more likely to feel those benefits because there is a timeline problem with the policies happening. No, thank you. But secondly, more importantly, within the effect of the policy needs time, Mr. Speaker. If we take policy right now, it doesn't really solve the problem in 1 month, but it needs certain 3 years, 4 years to solve the problem to make the situation better in this situation. So if we dismantle certain industry, short-termly there is certain harm in this situation. But instead we can cut the debt, we can repay the debt in this situation. We can recover the economy. Those individuals can gain another job in this industry, Mr. Speaker. But their policy in their policy they can't do that because they will demand those short-term benefits in this direction later. But thirdly, more importantly, we think these people is more likely to make, I don't want to say it, they have a visceral reactions to, in these instances, to the sensational images they are brought to now. We gave an example of let's change it. Over Iraq, when you know the fact there's weaponry which tried to attack the United States of America without considering whether the information is valid or not, citizens have demanded those states to go to Iraq and do it further, which is wrong when we talk about the long-term calculus. Or if we talk about Somalia, within this the United States of America has a visceral reaction towards the images of the United States of America soldiers who is drawn on the road, which is more likely to make sensational images, sensational choices for the United States of America to get out of Somalia, which was harmful to the United States of America in the long run because Somalia was made as a failed state, which is a hotbed of the terrorists, which is a further harm for the United States of America securities in this direction. This is more likely to create long-term harm.
Compared to the very short-term benefit, like very small short-term bonus stuff, in the case of long-term, like the state completely went its bankrupt and they are under the control of the IMF. They can have autonomy. Those situations, like one scenario, is extremely scary for the citizens to have. We believe they are not so stupid to jump to the very short term.
We think this short-term harm is also severe for that individual, Mr. Speaker. If you lose the job, that is harmful. You said that if you lose the job, this is persistently harmful to the individual in your cases. We think that is something which they can see viscerally in this situation. Furthermore, we think people has a tendency to underestimate certain risks they're going to have in this situation because they feel there are exceptions of the harm in this situation. There is another country who successfully recovered the economy in other cases. They will feel that we are exceptions. Just as that country, we can recover the economy in certain scenario, and we can avoid the risks materialize. That's why people is more likely to make those short-term benefit, seek short-term benefit, and just say crowds out the aim of the democracy, which will bring the benefit from the for the citizens in those cases, necessarily harms their cases. So thirdly, why our policy is better. Mr. Speaker, if you have a 3 years, 5 years to the interval to know the results of the policy directly, you can feel those. We can feel and experiences of the benefit in this situation. Meaning you can feel the experiences of the job in this situation, or you can feel the fact, for instance, when the stock market prices is going up inside those market, and value of the currency is increasing in those situations, you can experience the benefit in this situation. So we think those indirect representations is the one which is give the room for that individuals to make far rational calculuses in this situation. This really brings the benefit for the citizen itself in that scenario. So, Mr. Speaker, if you talk about direct representation and indirect representation, we think our policy will give the room for them to make better choices. That's why the motion must fall. Thank you.
Thank you, member of the opposition. Now I'd like to call upon Government Whip to summarize your case within some minutes. You're here.
after becoming Gemini champion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my partner told you, in the very core of our democracy, there's always an aspect of populism. Because this form of policy of democracy means citizens, whoever they are, create their state, create their future. And in creating a concept of our state, it's better that citizens can be confident and accountable enough of what they are establishing now. And if politicians are mediator between citizens and the concept of the state, we think it is important that citizens are confident and accountable and they like the politicians enough. Because the bond between polity and citizens is what we mean by saying populistic. So I have two issues to talk about in my speech. Firstly, what is being populistic and whether it is accountable in the first place. And secondly, in what kind of situation the polity can be best accountable, and we think when it is when this polity is populistic. And I like to touch my partner's extension. So before moving on to my summary, refutation. So one thing we heard from the government side is the fundamental denial of citizens' rationality in general. They said the effect of policy needs amount of time. But we think it is important that we let people always check that these policies. If you are caring about the information for people, you should just inform in that case, in the case about how the polity progresses, how austerity measures progresses, and we don't think people are so thoughtless that they neglect any of that information. And in this sense, it is also failure of that side of house that they just said that to my partner's extension that no one knows about future. That they said better decision is always what we hope. We think this in order for people to know whether even so dynamic current politics is accountable for themselves, it is better that people constantly question that policy. And this is not possible just by voting, right? Because policy is always dynamic, so dynamic that people cannot catch up with without letting them question that policy. We think this is extremely important. So before moving on to my summary, closing, please.
I'm sorry. But in your extension, you said you can have those rational decisions. People can check those in those policies, right? Well, our extension tells you that people don't is less likely to make those short-term calculations. OG said there's dismantling of this industry. It has a huge impact on the people's life. Don't you think you're contradicting with yourself?
Firstly, we think that the closing factory and resulting in some kind of losing job or those kind of things is also the extreme form of unaccountability for the people who are losing their job, right? If you are saying the people accountability is important, why do you neglect their hope for their recovery from that the loss of job? We think they are saying that always the policy made by politicians politicians are making on the spreadsheet like Excel is much better than what people want from them. We think this is just wrong stance at the government as long as we care about accountability of the policy. So firstly, what is being populistic and whether it is acceptable? First thing we heard from the opposition side, opening opposition, is importance of indirect democracy because they say because listening to all citizens is practically impossible. But firstly, what is necessary even in indirect democracy is that people and politicians can be conscious about the bond between them. If politicians lose incentive to call for citizens always and make all policies based on what they calculate on Excel, as I told you, the bond is now forgotten. The bond between politicians and citizens are now forgotten, and we think this is extremely dangerous. Because, as my partner told you, this simply shows the less accountability that is held between the people and the politicians. So we think that, and also, second thing we heard from opposition side is negligence of minority people. We think, no, populism doesn't mean just helping majority. Populism is based on what is best for the whole citizen, and we don't think politicians always interpret it as the benefit for majority people. We think politicians we think that it there are cases the politicians do care about minority people, even if it, and we think that. No, thank you. We think even if it crushes the benefit for majority people, as long as this decision making is based on the belief in the bond between politicians and citizens, we think this is just the acceptable way of use of politics. So, secondly, whether policy can be best accountable in populism.
Okay,
so,
that point, sir.
no, thank you. Okay, so firstly, we heard the failure of policies such as austerity measure, all those kind of things. We think the populism doesn't mean that policy decided by politicians, if it is not if it's not so profitable for citizens, that policy is not taken. We think there is a way in which citizens notice how important taking austerity measure is. But the premise behind this is that people can be confident that the austerity measure is good for themselves. And the only way for them to notice that is that politicians who chose that austerity measure is trustable for me, right? But secondly, if some kind of policy fails, such as taxation policy, as my partner told you, the only way for citizens to be democratically accountable and responsible enough for that failure is that they know that failure is result of my choice, right? Because of the bond between me and the politician. And if politicians and citizens are bound enough, we think this accountability and responsibility can be fulfilled enough. And also, they said the other ways, such like voting process, and this simply shows the radical belief in voting shows that people can be off hands from policy just when they voted. If austerity measure suddenly becomes issue of the state because the policy is extremely dynamic, people become not sure about whether their decision making was good or not. So, we think what citizens create as a result of democracy is infinitely diverse, and we cannot accuse any of these results as long as citizens try to do that on the sincere will to make society better. And when this citizen choice is embodied by politicians whom citizens sincerely believe in, that choice is the best product of democracy. And that is the reason why we are very proud to propose.
Thank you, Governor Wood. Now I would like to call upon the last speaker from the opposition side to conclude this tournament. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government told us citizens' will should always be reflected in democracy, and that is it. As the ultimate form of democracy, the populism should be the way to go. The opposition side told you, Mr. Speaker, how politicians are better actors in general than as in comparison to those citizens. So we are not naive enough to say that one of those ideas is absolutely correct and not the other, right, Mr. Speaker? So given the fact that to some extent we have to respect the will of the citizen, and to some extent it is true that politicians are better actors than citizens, the question of this debate is, how do we strike the best balance, the most appropriate balance in this circumstance? We told you from the closing opposition, the system of indirect democracy through the election, which gives general mandate to the politician, is the best system to strike the appropriate balance in this circumstance, and that is why we are extremely proud to oppose. I'm going to examine two issues at the end of this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk about whether or not citizens always have the capacity to make decisions in a correct manner. And secondly, I'm going to talk about, given that we don't think they can always, Mr. Speaker, like whether or not like populist democracy is the way to go, or we have to like side with the indirect democracy, which we told you from the opposition side. So to my first question, which is about whether or not citizens always have the capacity to make decisions in all circumstances. The OG told us how, Mr. Speaker, the people should be represented, people's will should be represented in all circumstances, and therefore, if they oppose austerity measures, we rather should not have those kind of things. Mr. Speaker. Now, when I asked POI to the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, about whether or not do they honestly believe, even in the context of Euro crisis, having no austerity measure is the way to go, he didn't give us the exact, precise answer, right, Mr. Speaker. That was problematic, Mr. Speaker, because like having almost no austerity measure, Mr. Speaker, is the likely consequence of the proposal, right? Given the fact that, for example, in Greece, there is a people protesting like continuously, right? So, Mr. Speaker, not giving the answer, Mr. Speaker, or like implicitly conceding that there will be the worst outcome under their proposal is problematic, Mr. Speaker, because the point is a failure of their proposal, Mr. Speaker. Now, secondly, like we told you from the closing opposition in our substantive matter, how on certain issues, Mr. Speaker, people do not have that sort of capacity. First of all, we told you how, Mr. Speaker, people can be lured by the short-term benefits and neglecting long-term harm. We gave you an example of austerity measure, Mr. Speaker, because let's face it, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the reality. It is true that to some extent, at least, austerity measure is necessary, even though it might not have the absolute support from the citizen. Or even in the case of Japan, if we see the reality, it is true that we have to raise the consumption tax, whether or not there is necessarily a majority support, right, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, given those circumstances, we have to face the reality that people are not always equipped with the capacity to compare and fairly and equally compare the long-term consequences and the short-term consequences. Secondly, we told you how, Mr. Speaker, people can be lured by the sensational information and that sort of thing clouds their rationality, and they cannot make the rational decision in those circumstances. We gave an example with Iraq, which was a failure, honestly speaking, because at the end of the day, there was no weapon of mass destruction, right? People didn't doubt the correctness of the information in the first place. The point is the fact that our analysis was that show people do not always have that sort of capacity. The response coming from closing government was twofold. First of all, they said, that the whips there, we deny the capacity of people in general. That is not the case, right? We told you how, in some circumstances, Mr. Speaker, in those cases where there's short-term interest conflicting with the long-term interest, or there is sensational image coming into play, Mr. Speaker, in those specific circumstances, people are not able, and that we have to balance, Mr. Speaker, the reflection of citizens' will and the politicians utilizing their own specific knowledge. And the second response coming from them is to say that, if that is the problem, we can give information to the people, and that will be enough. But that missed the nuance of extension, right? What we told you from the extension is that even though people are given the information, because of the kind of information they are given, where there's a conflicting interest between short-term and long-term, or information being sensational, given the nature of this information, even though they are given it, they cannot make the rational decision, and that is why the closing government was never ever able to deal with the extension in a correct manner. So moving on to my second point, which is about, given that we don't think they cannot always make the right decision, which system is the best way for us to go? Now, they already told us, Mr. Speaker, people's will should always be reflected, as I said, and the response coming from all is to say that politicians are better in some circumstances as a consequence, and that their proposal there be more oppression to some people like minority. The response coming from GAP, especially from Tomioto, is to say that there will not be different because, even under the opposition system, we are going to embrace democracy. We have to listen to the will or voice of the people. So the answer we gave you from the closing opposition is, Mr. Speaker, we can make the difference if we go with the system of indirect democracy, Mr. Speaker. That's what we told you. We told you how, Mr. Speaker, elections give time lag between the time policies are made and the time people make decisions or make assessment on the outcome of those policies, right? That is the reason why people will be allowed to see the long-term consequence or the full consequence of certain policy under their proposal and not in their proposal, right? People cannot have the proper assessment, Mr. Speaker, under their proposal. That was the problem. That's how we are going to make difference through our system, Mr. Speaker. So that was what we told you. Yes, sir.
So why we have to pursue the long-term benefit in every circumstance?
Okay, that leads me on to my next point, engagement with the closing government. Now, the closing government talks about how accountability is extremely important, and given that no one is perfect, politicians might be wrong, and therefore we rather let people decide everything. That was problematic because, as I said in my POI to assume, Mr. Speaker, accountability is guaranteed even under our proposal, right? To the extent that elections are held and people can give general mandate to the politicians, right? The question they have to answer from the closing government is why we have to go further than the general mandate, Mr. Speaker. That was the question they were never able to grapple with. But secondly, the problem with their extension from the government is that they never broke the premise of the opposition side, which is to say that politicians are, it might be true, no one is perfect because we are all humans, but politicians are at least better in terms of their knowledge and resources than people, right? That was the premise which they have to break so that the extension can stand fully, right? That was the reason why the extension falls down into this debate. But thirdly, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, more critically, also clashing with what the closing up told us, we told you how, Mr. Speaker, given that we have to ensure the accountability, our way of ensuring accountability accountability is better than their way of absolute accountability, right? Because they told you, Mr. Speaker, if we have the election, as I already told you at the early part of this issue, Mr. Speaker, we can ensure that accountability is still guaranteed, but in a better way than their proposal, right? To the extent that people can have a long-term consequence and have the proper assessment, or, Mr. Speaker, in some circumstances, people are easily swayed by the can have visceral reaction. We allow the politician to make rational decisions rather than visceral reaction, but still those politicians are elected by the people, and therefore the chain of accountability is sustained, right? And therefore, as I told you in my introduction, this debate is about how to strike the most appropriate balance, Mr. Speaker, because both sides, to some extent, are saying the right thing in today's debate, right? Democracy is important, but in some circumstances, at least, we have to make sure that, Mr. Speaker, politicians are able to make decisions whether or not there is absolute support, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, we have to side with the opposition so that our system can fulfill the true sense, the core part of democracy. For those of the reasons, we are extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you, opposition whip. Now, all speech is over. Thank you for your very nice cooperations. ではですね、ジャッジの方は304の方に移ってディスカッションの方を進めてください。よろしくお願いします。